worked as a truck driver in New Hampshire and would commonly deliver goods to other facilities all across the East Coast. It paid really well and was enough to help me with bills, but the driving was hectic. Driving a big truck for hours a day on the road sounds relaxing and chill, but it's easier said than done. The hours were long, and you couldn't really stop for anything unless you were on your break. Our policy stated that we get a 30-minute break when we have driven for a period of 8 cumulative hours. Only after did breaks end were we required to get back on the road and onto the given destination. On top of that, the hours were insane, some even averaging about 70 hours a week. While it was a chill job with crazy hours, I'd sometimes have to bring loads of coffee to keep me awake throughout the day and night. I've definitely had some pretty weird encounters being a trucker, but this one takes the prize. I had been driving through Pennsylvania and was currently on my way back to New Hampshire. About 2 hours into the drive, I stopped to go to sleep behind a couple other trailers until morning. I'm asleep for about a good 7 hours before I hear what sounded like a bang on the right door of my truck. It's around 6 a.m. and I was pissed that I had been awoken from my slumber. Figuring it was one of the other truck drivers, I get out of my sleeping compartment and go to the window expecting to see a fellow trucker. However, to my surprise, there was not a single soul in sight. It was then when I heard another knock, this time on the left door of the truck. Freaked the hell out, I look out the left window only to see no one, and there was nothing but silence now. At this point, I'm trying to figure out who or what is banging on my doors, but all of a sudden, I then hear it on both doors. The knocking was so loud and heavy that it even shook the truck. Keep in mind, this was an 80,000-pound semi, so whatever was making this knocking noise had to be extremely strong. It eventually came to a point where it became weird to just flat out annoying. I yell out for this person to stop disturbing me. However, it happened again not even a minute later. It was at that point where I had enough and hopped into my driver's seat and started her up. I can also see the other 2 trucks begin to start up as well and drive off as if they had just experienced the same thing I did. I ended up telling my other trucker friends about this, and they all shared their creepy encounters too. Being on the road all the time can certainly open doors to weird and unexplainable things. If there are any other truckers who have experienced something similar or something entirely different, please spread the word.
In the mid-2000s, I worked as a truck driver as my full-time job to provide income for my family. The pay was very mild but compared to other states, but the benefits were amazing, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I kept this job. The only downside is that you had to be constantly driving to the designated locations with barely any breaks. When we did have breaks, it was only for about 30 minutes when driving for a spat of 8 hours. While it might have seemed like this chill and relaxed job, it was anything but that. One night, I had just transported some goods to a factory of some type where my truck was being unloaded while I was taking a nap in my sleeper berth. As I'm laying there waiting for everything to be unloaded, I noticed a man come walking up to my truck. He looked to be in his 20s, wore all black, and made it seem like he didn't want to be seen. He's looking around my truck, and once he spots me, he gives me a gentle wave while motioning me to come down from my truck. My sleeper berth is tucked in right behind the driver's and passenger seat, so I wasn't sure how he knew I was up there. I hopped over to the driver's seat to roll down my window and asked what he wanted. Right off the bat, he starts mumbling his words and can't even keep a sentence straight. Saying like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I just like your truck," to, "Can I come see it?" Now, I didn't want to seem like an ass, but I told him to leave me alone as he had just woken me up. He seemed to get the hint and proceeded to walk away across the street until I no longer saw him. I started thinking to myself as to who that guy was, as he didn't exactly look like someone who had worked at the facility. I slept for another hour or so when I got awoken again by 2 police officers knocking on my side door. They introduced themselves and immediately asked if I had seen a younger man walking around here. At first, I didn't know what they were talking about, but that's when I remembered about the man who came up to my truck. I gave the best description I could to the police, and had mentioned he wore all black and what sort of questions he had asked me. I later learned that he had broken into a woman's car while she was still inside and stole all of her valuables and did God knows what else. Turns out, this guy had wanted just to get into my truck with me. I'm not sure if he wanted to steal it, rob me, harm me, or something much worse. I'm still unsure if he was ever caught or is still out there. This just goes to show you that everything you will ever do is dangerous.
My name is Jim, and I've spent a lot, and I mean a lot, of time on the road as a trucker. Ever since trucking school, I've been driving long distances for hours every day, and even with benefits, the pay wasn't the best. While it did pay enough to financially support me and my wife, the stress it had on top of me was unbearable. Being in a truck for hours at a time really forced you to make sacrifices. Once in a while, I'd miss out on family events like birthdays and even holidays, which didn't feel good at all. On top of that, America is in desperate need for truckers to keep up with demand, which made the situation even worse. I drive for about 12 hours a day, and we couldn't stop for any reason until we reached our destination. Needless to say, I barely had any time with family. One night, I was doing my nightly routine of driving to a warehousing complex to deliver some products for major retail businesses like Target and Best Buy. I was somewhere in a rural area of Wisconsin on this long, empty road that stretched across the state. It's around 6 a.m., and I'm sipping my coffee trying to keep myself awake. Being a full-time trucker, caffeine was your best friend. If you didn't have it, you were in trouble. So there I am, driving down this road trying to keep myself awake when I see something big walk across the road from my headlights. I yell out an "oh shit" while practically slamming my brakes, coming to a complete stop. All the while, I'm cussing to myself, thinking that I just hit a person or possibly a bear. Going back, at first I did think it was a person, but then I remembered that whatever it was massive. 9 feet tall, a bulky body, and the movement it was walking looked abnormal. I step outside of the truck with my gun in hand, going to where I saw it. To my surprise, however, there was seemingly nobody on this road. Nobody walking, no roadkill, no nothing. The only thing I did see was faint tire marks on the road from me hitting the brakes too hard. I call out for anybody who might have been nearby, but got no response other than the sound of wind picking up and the truck engine. I get back inside and continue my route, managing to finish it within a few hours, but couldn't get what I had just seen off my mind. Later that same day, I call up one of my other fellow truckers and tell him about what I had just seen on the road. It turns out that he had experienced things that were similar and that it was likely a hallucination given that I was tired. Thankfully, I have a camera that sits next to the interior and was thankfully able to capture a brief second of this creature before it went out of frame. The photo will be on screen now. As you can see, the camera quality isn't that great, but it was likely due to the condensation on the front windshield. Because it was a single road with forest on opposite sides, there was a pretty good chance that it was an animal. My only question is what kind of animal 9 feet tall walks on 2 legs? I don't know if it was a person, I don't know if it was Bigfoot. One thing I do know was that I wasn't imagining it.
If I lost it all and I had to start from scratch, here's what I do to get back to 6 figures a year in 4 steps. So step 1,